California for 3 days, so there'll be no Mass here in the chapel Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at 8:15. So important that you plan on coming to the mission or retreat, whatever you want to call it. It will start next Sunday with a conference in the church at 6 o'clock at night, followed by a potluck in the hall to have, like, everybody get together and so you can meet the priest. They're very holy, good priest, very intelligent. As Father Shannon Collin used to be all the time on EWTN. And then on Monday through Thursday, there's both morning catechism classes for adults that will be, and kids. We're inviting the kids from the school too. But anyway, we'll start with the 8:15 Mass, Monday through Thursday, followed by a short break. And then in the hall, where the school is, we will have the catechism. And then in the evening, every day, Monday through Thursday, there'll be Mass at 5:15, followed by a short break, and then the mission with prayer and blessings. And if anyone can help too, in between the little the Mass and the thing, to have a little break there, if people want to help put out some coffee, or maybe we can have coffee, Mexican sweetbread, something. Just have a little break between Mass and the mission. And they will be hearing confessions too. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen. The gospel today has a lot to do with these 40 days of Lent. Hopefully, in this week and a half that you've lived, you've left behind all sin. In the first, in the reading from St. Paul to the Thessalonians, we hear about sexual sins, saying that our sexual part of our body is to not be used in a sinful way. And he's very clear in that, and that is a big temptation, especially for us men, to say no to all that sin. And so we are hopefully left sin behind, and we are going up the hill to somewhere. At the end of the 40 days of Lent, we don't want to just be, oh, now I'm just where I was, and I'm just keep going where I was. No, it's going up the hill, and going up hills are always hard. It's much easier going downhill to hell than going uphill to God. But downhill, you only encounter the devil. Going up the hard hill to God, you find him, you have an encounter with him, and it's a good encounter. As we hear when Peter was there with James and John, he goes to Jesus, "It's good to be here." And hopefully, by the end of Lent, you'll find out all the stuff of the world is not as good as to be with God. Really important to know, it's wonderful to be with God. Don't believe the lie of the devil, of TV, of all this other, that it's good to be going downhill. That is not good. Peter said again, "Lord, it is good for us to be here." And so we have to believe that. And St. Peter, if you read his letter too, the first letter he says, "I, who saw Jesus in his glory." Okay? So here we are hearing the gospel. Of course, we believe the gospel. But it's nice when you even have another backup of the gospel, which is the letter of St. Peter, where he says, "We saw Jesus in his glory." And why is that important? Because we still are seeing Jesus crucified, or we see Jesus in a little host, and we think about Jesus in a little statue, We have some vague concept of Jesus. But going up the hill in this Lent, hopefully we will come to a real encounter with a real person, hidden in his humanity, but revealed in his divinity. And so none of us have been able to be up on Mount Tabor and actually see Jesus in his glory. So his human nature was resplendent with his divine nature. And they actually got to see it. Not only was his body totally transfigured, also his clothes. And it was, for them, a great help. So for us, we need that help to see Jesus and to know Jesus in a more real way, who he is. Again, when the Father spoke to them in a cloud, he said, "This is my beloved Son." So we learned that beloved, the word beloved, is a very important word. Someone who's deeply loved. If the Father deeply loves Jesus, shouldn't we also deeply love him? So that's another thing during Lent, is to try to deeply love Jesus, to encounter this love. He loves us, we love him. The Father loves Jesus, we love Jesus too. So then, though, when this cloud overshadowed Peter, James, and John, they fell prostrate on their face. Again, in this host, there is the same Jesus that was in the glory, the same God who they prostrated before. And sad to say, at the 6:30 Mass this morning, which I said in the big church, and I was telling people, this is why we kneel down humbly and receive Jesus on the tongue. Still, people just put out their hand. It seemed like a couple more people. But most people kneel down, receive on the tongue. But there's still these stubborn people. And Jesus, they felt fear too. So we see in Jesus two things. Well, in God. So when they're in this cloud, like when Moses was up in Mount Sinai, great fear came over the people. And that's good. Because we do need to fear God. And this modern idea that, God's just, as I say, Barney. We've made him into Barney, and we've made ourselves into God. We have switched things around. We are now the God that decides what's right and wrong. And God is this little Barney that we can always come over and when we're lonely and hug ourselves to and feel we're sick or something, we have a cuddly little teddy bear or something like that. No. God is God. And Peter, James, and John fell prostrate and had great fear. Great fear. It says, they fell on their faces and were exceedingly afraid. Not just, this is an interesting experience. No. But then Jesus came and touched them and said, "Do not be afraid." Now some people say, really he didn't want them to be afraid. No. Jesus could have allowed the Father to come in a very, "Hi guys, how are you? I'm glad you're hanging out with my son, keep it up, do a good job." No, he allowed them to feel this fear. Then, though, he touched them and said, "Do not be afraid." So there's these two aspects to God. The true greatness of God, that we should have fear, and I am afraid of dying, because I am afraid of this encounter with this awesome God. But at the same time, I know that Jesus will be there with me to help me in an encounter with him. But still, so there is healthy fear and still Jesus saying, "Do not be feared. Do not be afraid." They go together. They're not contradictory. I'm not afraid of God and I am afraid of God. Does that sound contradictory? But I know who God is. I'm afraid to offend him. I'm afraid of him sending me to hell. And And I'm afraid of his awesome majesty, His greatness, his power that created all of creation and everything. That's something real. And I respect that. And I'm going to be this sinner coming and begging for mercy. But I also know that Jesus said, do not be afraid. I can work them together. I respect, I fear in a healthy way, but at the same time, he's saying, don't be afraid. And then, so as we come into this union or closeness to God during Lent, as we go up the hill, we want to let go of all the worldly stuff and all the worldly voices. Everything that is pulling us down. Friends, what we're seeing, what we're reading, all the different other voices. And Lent is a good time to be quiet. It really is. Take some quiet time. I was thinking about, so maybe you can't go for 40 days and 40 nights on a retreat out in the desert. What about 40 hours? I was thinking about 40 hours. Wow, 40 hours is a long time too. It's almost 2 complete days. 40 hours. Would I give 40 hours of quiet time? Or how about even 40 minutes? Would you give 40 minutes of quiet to God to try to prepare for that encounter of the real God? That's the whole goal. So these 40 days of Lent is to go up to have a deeper, real encounter with God. It's not just some statue or a host. It's a real person. And he wants to have this relationship with us, but we're the ones that are, either by our sins or by our lack of dedicating time and real sincere prayer, that's keeping us from it. So God is so good because he's always calling us, though. Come on up, get away from all this stuff. Stop going downhill, you're going the wrong way. Turn around, come uphill. Come up the hard road, and I'm waiting for you. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.